Hi Dan, how you doing?
Not bad, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, pretty good. I've been messing about a little bit, and the trem bar is still something I could do with a little bit of work on. So I wondered if that's what we could focus on today.
Oh, it's a cruel mistress, isn't it?
It is, and I don't look at it enough. And when I do, I'm always a bit disappointed with what comes out. So
definitely a case of that's what she said.
Yeah, she always is. Yes.
So, what is it about the trem arm or the trem techniques that you maybe feel that you're not getting, or things that you would like to do that you hear that you can't do or have not yet mastered?
I think it's familiarity, and so in a way, I guess I'm asking for a bit of a revision session.
Yeah, we have looked at this before.
Yeah.
But there's no harm in looking at something twice because, we do forget, we all live busy lives and it's very hard to practice absolutely everything.
So just
retain all the information, isn't it?
Take me through a number of your favourite techniques.
Favourite techniques. Okay. I mean, the trem system, I'm sure most people know what it does and what it is. But for those who don't, let's have a quick review of what it does, why it's there, how it works.
Yep.
Now, many people wrongly think that this funny little bar on the guitar makes the sound go strange when you go like this with it.
Yes.
No. No, it does not. You actually depress the bar. Now, when you depress the bar, you physically move the bridge that the strings are attached to.
Yeah.
In the back of the guitar, you can actually, if you do a close-up on mine, I guess you can see I've got a little cutout in the back of my guitars. I've got a special system in the back of my tremolo. But you can see a couple of the springs. Most tremolo systems have between 3 and 5 springs. Sometimes people add more springs or take them out. Can you see that? Yeah. Ooh, just about. Those little silver shiny things in there. Yeah. So they are springs. And that spring loads the trem. So they're attached to the body at one end. So if you imagine, here's my body of my guitar in the cavity that we've just looked at. The springs are attached on one end to the body, at the other end to the bridge. When you move the bridge, the bar which comes down the block, which is attached to those springs, moves away, thus stretching the spring. The spring wants to pull it back again. When you let go of the trem bar, it snaps back to the correct position. Yeah. And that's adjustable. If you put on heavier strings, they'll pull more on your
kind of the
bridge.
Neutral zone then.
Yeah, so it's like a 0 point.
Yeah.
If you put on lighter strings, the springs will be pulling the bridge back further the other way.
Yeah.
So it's a balancing act to set the bridge correctly between the pull of the strings and the pull of the strings.
Yeah. The pull of the strings.
Springs and the pull of the string. Oh my goodness. Anyway, the upshot of it is that it allows the bridge, again, possibly a close-up required. Yeah. Sorry about this, folks.
Right, sorry.
So, as we can see, when we move the trem bar, the bridge moves. The strings are connected to that, and as such, they're going to go down in pitch. Now, most guitars, not all, but most guitars have a degree of sort of movement both ways with the trem.
Yeah.
You can push it down to make notes go down in pitch. You can pull them up to make notes go up. Up they go, or down they go. Some people like their trem sitting flat on the body of their guitar, so it only has down movement. That's a personal setup preference. It doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah.
But I like it floating personally. I've actually got a little recess cut in the back of my, sort of around the trem here, allowing me to pull up and get down, so I've got a fair range. Now that's quite important because that's going to make a little difference to kind of maybe the things that you can and can't do with the trem. Yeah, it takes a little bit of getting used to if you're having your trem resting on the body and you've only got down movement.
Yeah.
So let's look at some of the bobby basic things you can do. Now, before we get into that, I'm going to ask you, when you do engage the trem system, is it possible to give me a sort of demonstration of what you do?
I don't even know if I know it well enough for that, but I guess I can. We've got this kind of
okay.
Kind of thing, yeah.
So, although it may not be brimming with finesse or be amazingly subtle, at least you're thinking about what you're doing, and that's an important factor.
Yeah.
So our trem system can offer us a wide range of possibilities. But I will say at this point as well that there are lots of different trem systems. So at one end you've got things like the old style Bigsby trem systems, which were often fitted to sort of Gibson style guitars, such as sort of the 335s and that sort of thing. A few of the old school Les Pauls and SGs had Bigsbys. People have fitted them to Telecasters as well. You know, you can buy custom shop Telecasters with a Bigsby. With a Bigsby, they have a very sort of short range, and the arm tends to move far more than the range, if you know what I mean.
Right,
it's like it isn't quite relative to how far the note moves. The note doesn't move as far as it feels you're pushing the bar on the ones that I've tried. So really there for like a light warble.
Yeah.
You then go up to the sort of 6-screw strat style trem systems, which can, if set up properly, actually behave themselves quite well and offer a fairly decent range of travel. I've got a 6-screw trem system on my Strat, works very, very well. We've then got the kind that I've got here, where it sits on 2 knife edges, so it's a slightly better range and the slightly smoother. The Paul Reed Smith trem system, which you've got on yours and I've got on my Paul Reed Smith, again it has 6 screws, but it's a much more advanced system than the standard Fender 6-screw system, and it returns to pitch well and it's exceedingly smooth.
Yeah.
But they're all slightly different. They all feel a little different. They all work in a similar way, more or less, but offer a slightly different feel to the player. You've then got Floyd Rose systems, which lock at both ends. The strings lock into the bridge, and there's a locking top nut on most Floyd Rose systems. I say most because the odd person out there has the old school Floyd Rose, where it doesn't have a locking top nut.
Yeah.
And they offer a huge range, especially if you've got a recess in the back of your guitar where you can yank the strings right back.
Yeah.
So depending on the system you've got, this will make a bit of a difference to maybe how much the travel is and how effectively you can play some of these licks. But we're going to look at some of the classic sort of stuff and classic ways of using the trem. One way of using your trem is for a gentle warble. So, it sounds really simple, and it is. So we were going to address that straight away. Yeah. This is fundamental to the subtlety.
Like vibrato, isn't it, almost? It's like, keep it more subtle and watch the speed as well.
Absolutely. How we hold the bar, though, is really, really important. Now, I know this sounds like maybe somebody trying to teach grandmothers to suck eggs. But once you've got that bar in your hand, it's almost impossible to put that bar in your hand unless you're mega gentle and not move the bridge in some way. Because it's like a lever.
Yeah.
So the nearer the end you are, the easier, because of the lever action, that it moves that bridge. So it's almost impossible to kind of grab hold of it and warble it subtly. I'll tell you for why. The trem system has a natural wanting to go back to the 0 point because it's a spring-loaded system. It's like if you took the shock absorbers off a car and you took the springs out. Even if you compressed them, which you probably couldn't do by hand, those springs always want to spring back out and go to the full length.
Yeah.
You know, ever change pickups in a guitar and you've got the little springs which hold them in place and you've got to kind of scrunch them up and then they go boing and run around the room. They have they naturally want to be a certain length because they're sprung. Well, a trem system being sprung, it naturally wants to sit in the position that it is here, completely undisturbed. That's why setting up the trem just so is very important to tuning stability and getting the right feel. But it also means that when we hold that trem arm, if we literally hold on to it too tightly, then all of that, whatever it is, tension or movement, however minor, is then going to get translated through the trem system. If I play a chord, I grabbed it super gently, moved it about an inch, and already you can hear that the pitch wobbled.
Yeah.
So, first thing to remember, it's not Titanic's last life jacket.
Yeah.
Don't grab hold of it for dear life and not let go of it. Let it go back to its 0 point. So the way to do that is you can sort of kind of cradle it, if you will. I tend to, for the gentle warbles, I've got my pick between my thumb and my first finger, and my little finger, third and second, then sort of cradle the bar, but we don't hold the bar.
Yeah.
You think if you cradle a baby just sort of sits there. You're not sort of holding on to it and stopping it moving. That's that will get you sent to court. So you're literally cradling the bar there. So my hand is actually going to move more than the bar, but I'm not grabbing hold of it real tightly.
Like that.
Yeah.
Ooh. Yeah, I'm barely touching it.
Isn't that a nicer sound?
Yeah.
As opposed to...
Yeah.
As Steve Lukather said, if your guitar sounds like this, it's not in tune. Just cradling it gently. So I'm moving my hand, the bar is moving around in the little cradle that I've made with my fingers.
Yeah, you're just sort of nudging it.
Yeah. And it's allowing it to always go back to that 0 point because I'm not holding it hard. There's so many things with electric guitar. People hear an electric guitar solo and they think you must be clenching your teeth and all incredibly tense.
Yeah.
Ever tried playing like that?
Well, yeah.
Even Paul Reed-Smith said, I've never seen somebody play the guitar without a smile on their face. You know, there's a lot of things with guitar playing where actually subtlety wins the day. It's a really touchy-feely instrument. And things like the trem system, when you hear Eddie Van Halen doing all his wild trem stuff, that guy's got an amazing degree of sensitivity for the instrument. It doesn't sound like it, but to have that level of control while never making it sound appalling. I once said in one of these what do we call it?
Podcast episodes.
One of those.
Yeah.
I once said that one of the things which is the beauty of the electric guitar is the fact that you've got this thing that has the potential to sound so bad. So bad. Like you've been pushed down the stairs with the guitar amp on full and the guitar strapped to it out of tune. It has the potential to sound that bad, but reining it in and making it sound good, especially when you're using tons of distortion, actually, is quite hard to do.
Yeah.
You know, because you've got to have sensitivity for the instrument. The fact that you've got to be sort of super gentle, but at the same time you've got to grab it by the scruff of the neck.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Keep under control,
Yeah. So when you grab that bar nice and gently, and you don't actually grab at it, you can see it's moving around in my hand. You get really nice gentle warbles. I'm barely moving the bridge. Hardly moving it.
Yeah. All of those.
So I just had like F, G, like a G maybe, A minor 7, C, So for real gentle warbles, and I think this is the thing, sometimes when we think of the old strat trems with the 6 screws, it's easier for us to think, oh, that's really old school technology, I'm not sure I want that on my guitar. But actually there's range more than enough within an old school sort of style trem for pretty much all of your everyday trem antics. I mean, I'm hardly moving the bridge there.
Yeah.
Now, this brings me on to my second point.
You sort of practice just by watching it in your hand, can't you? Or even without playing.
Oh, the trem bar, yes.
Yeah, and just sort of see it moving.
I say.
Yeah, it's good.
What? Now, somebody coming halfway in on this podcast could be misled. Gary was talking about his trem arm. Now, that sounds, to my ears, nicer. It's got more subtlety about it.
Yeah.
The other thing, point 2. We actually, for this sort of regular stuff, and even some of the other trem antics, you don't necessarily need to move the bar as far as you think. Now, there are some things which do require the strings to pretty much fall off the fretboard. We'll look at them in a second. Yeah. But for all of this sort of gentle warbling, we don't actually have to go that far with it. So let's look at something else. We're going to look at sort of some Jeff Beckisms.
Yeah, nice.
So what we're going to do, we're going to be little flicks up and little flicks down. So what we're going to do here, let's pick an easy phrase.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Let's have a phrase. One you think that... Yeah, easy first, yeah.
So let's deal with one way on the trem to start with. So one thing we can do to get these... You know you've arrived when your very name tells you what the kind of guitar style is going to be. Mm-hmm. Jeff Beckisms.
Yeah.
Hendrixisms.
Everyone knows that.
Halenisms.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do, we're going to deal with the dipping bit to start with. We can take something as simple as the pentatonic scale. Start with the higher note. That's it, so... so we don't hear the note come back up again as well at the very end. Imagine you're almost like sliding from one note to the other. That's the kind of effect we want. So instead of going... We don't want to hear it come back up. So we want the trem arm in its 0 position when we hit that note on the 5th fret. Yep. But for the other notes, the 8, 8, 7, 7, 7, 8 notes on the other strings. Almost like a crying sound.
Just taking the finger off to mute it.
Yeah, and letting the bar come back to 0. So.
Yep, I think so. could damp it with that finger, or just by taking the finger off?
Probably take the finger off. Probably, yeah.
That's hard.
Remember as well, you're going to get probably more travel.
Yeah.
For your, or more, get this right, more sort of note movements for the travel of trem, the same travel on the lower string. So your thin string isn't going to move as far for the same amount of push.
Oh, right, so you've got to push further on that one.
Or kind of, or less on the others, whichever way you're looking. But one thing I am doing here as well with my hand which is operating the trem is I'm on top of it this time.
Yeah.
So that way I'm not hemmed in by clutching it or cradling it. Reason being, that's fine if you're playing chords with a strum, but now we have to be accurate because we're playing individual notes. Also, it allows me to let go of it super easily. I'm almost sliding off it. You see that? So you want almost like the effect like it's two notes. Yeah. So what you don't want is wound up. You want wound up, wound up, wound up. Yeah. Because the minute you bring the trem back up again, it's like you're getting an extra note.
It reacts quite quickly, doesn't it?
Oh yeah,
that's the
absolutely.
thing that I'm struggling with. Even if you take...
So yeah, so the lower string's causing a few more problems.
Yeah. It's quite hard.
So the other thing we can do as well on the same note, because we can also use this note for the other thing, is the up movement.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do is kind of do our kind of cradling motion with the trem arm again. But this time we're going to close our hand, causing the trem to shoot the note up and then back again. That's it. Well, that one was pretty successful, yeah. You can also do a little pull-up movement at the same time as closing your hand. You want to kind of have accentuate the sound. So what you can do then is put the two together. Beck-esque.
Yeah, yeah. That kind of like, so he's like...
So you're sort of using the flick up to accentuate maybe some notes, and then maybe dropping it down into the next note, or even pulling off into that note once you've dropped it. Which can help in the control factor with all of this stuff, because I don't know about you, but I do have a degree of engineering sympathy.
Yeah.
But I swear there's plenty of members of the human race that don't.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
So, like we said, this is a lever.
Yeah.
The whole point of a lever is to make an action easier.
Yeah.
So the longer the lever, if we had a trem arm and it was 3 foot long, you
breathe on it.
You breathe on it and you go,
yeah.
But we can use this. We can use the length of it. Sometimes I find if I want real control, moving down the bar to here. So my hand may be here, and that's sort of exercising a degree of sort of pressure on it. But I'm also using the edge of my palm here, where you've got the crease just below your little finger joint.
Yeah.
So not on the finger joint. The next one below is pretty much sitting. The bar is sort of sitting in that, and I'm using that as a lever. Because that will then offer you a little more resistance. It's kind of like effectively having 2 sets of springs in your trem system.
Yeah, because you've got your other hand there as well.
That's it. Because often what I've noticed is 2 things: the grabbing of the bar, which I talked about.
Yeah.
And I'm not singling you out. I'm talking in general, like what I see. Grabbing of the bar, and maybe moving the bridge more than is necessary.
Yeah.
You've got to remember, talking of the old engineering sympathy thing, a string, when you pluck it, it moves.
Yeah.
It has a wave pattern. And that wave pattern, to a point, will transfer through certain pitch changes.
Yeah.
So, as the pitch goes up or as the pitch goes down. But if the pitch goes down too far, i.e.
it drops out, wouldn't it?
It's exactly that, it drops out. So you lose some of that, by losing the tension. The strings, obviously, whatever energy the string had in it is no longer in it.
Yeah.
So if you move that bar too far, things are not going to sustain and work for you to be able to perform anything with a trem.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
So that's the Jeff Beckisms. I quite like. I know we've looked before at sort of scooping into notes, which I think is pretty cool. So we can have another look at that. I think you've pretty much got that down, but maybe just need to refine it. Maybe with these ideas that will help you do that. Scooping into notes, folks out there, is a great big ether.
Yes.
Is basically where, as we move from note to note, say we're going up a single string, maybe a scale-like kind of figure. To transfer from note to note, we dip the trem as we leave our first note and slide it to the next. and so on and so forth.
Good stuff, yeah.
I didn't move the trem much. That's something to remember. That's better. I was going to say, you don't want to create an additional note by doing it.
Yeah.
You don't kind of want to go, unless that's the sound you want.
Yeah.
To do a traditional scooping, you're literally coming off one note and scooping it just like yeah, that's all you need to move the trem bar by. And the less you move that trem bar, probably the better the thing's going to sustain.
Yeah, okay.
You're not loosening and tightening the string all the time.
What you were saying,
yeah. So just a little movement, just that little movement. So another variation on this is taking the Jeff Beck idea of sort of snapping that note up, where we cradled the trem arm and we closed our hand to create that snapping kind of sound. Now, with that, you can actually kind of do that. It's like a sort of scooping up the notes as you go up in reverse. So you... like, however you feel. Yeah. Now, if you want to create that kind of vocal-like sound, especially when you mix in certain techniques with certain scales, which have a certain sound. I mean, I'm thinking here of maybe something like the Phrygian Dominant, which is basically the harmonic minor scale, but starting on the 5th degree. So, in other words, we're going to take A harmonic minor, we're going to start it on E. But all of those little semitone jumps, I'm going to use the bar to flick up to those. And we get a really interesting, almost exotic sounding kind of vocal kind of sound. the idea.
Yeah.
So you can mix certain techniques in with certain scales. If the scale kind of leads you that way, it can sound quite interesting.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah. I think that sounds quite nice. So maybe let's look at a couple of other possibilities. For those 80s rock moments, you got to do the dive bomb on the G string while catching the harmonic. How are you with that one?
I think I remember doing it before. Whether I practiced it enough,
it's a classic. Dimebag Darrell loved it. You sort of dip the G. So I'm basically plucking the G string with my, I say plucking, sort of pulling off from nowhere with my fretting hand. So I'm using the second fret, pulling off at the second fret. Dipping the trem. As I come up, while it's still sustained, catching the harmonic at the third. So you want to just naturally catch it without plucking again.
Yeah, okay.
So there's your harmonic. Just place your finger over it as the string comes up to pitch. That's the general idea. We just got to keep the rest of the strings super under control, yeah? Yeah! If you feel that the string hasn't got enough movement in it to sustain the harmonic, you can always do what I did and kind of like pull off again. Yeah. And this is where we can use the trem quite violently this time.
Yeah.
Again, still do it with enough subtlety so it doesn't sound out of tune. With the third, because harmonics tend to become slightly more elusive as you get to the lower frets. You can get them at the second fret even. Sort of hear it coming out. It's a little harder to catch, let alone sustain, While you're trying to perfect all of that, if you want to put stabilisers on so you've still got the effect in the meantime without being quite so difficult, try the 4th or 5th frets. They're usually a little easier, One thing I will say with the PRS trems, there's not a lot of up movement.
No.
Setting them up by the book, unless you want the trem.
It up on the harmonic.
I'm yanking it up as well. Yeah. On the PRS, even if you want it set so it's level with the body, the amount of room at the back is something like 1/16 of an inch.
Yeah.
Yeah, you think with the Floyd Rose, you can pull them back an entire inch,
Yeah.
And certainly with mine, I've got probably double that here.
Yeah.
If not a little bit more, maybe like 1/4 of an inch or an eighth of an inch, maybe.
Got quite a recess there, haven't you?
I have. So I've got a little bit more room for movement. But even if you are using a trem system where you don't have the up range quite so much, what you can do is add to the drama by not yanking it up so fast, so you still get the appearance or the sort of audio sort of sound of it going up and up and up. Pull back beyond the sort of 0 position. The other thing you can do in a very similar vein is, rather than catch the harmonic, as I say, very much a Dimebag Darrell kind of thing, is actually get a pick harmonic, a pinch harmonic, you know. So we're going to the more violent end of trem abuse, really.
Getting this whole kind of...
And then sort of abuse it with your tremolo once you've done that, you know. One last one. If you've just switched this on, we are not murdering our guitar.
Well,
educational content.
In mind with this trem,
The one last thing I want to look at, this is kind of a slightly controversial one in a funny kind of way, is the gurgling sound. Now, some people like John Petrucci and Steve Vai use the gurgling action of the trem, where you basically, to a degree, you're setting in motion the strings wobbling, by sort of thranging it thus. Interestingly, Joe Satriani hates that sound. Right. He doesn't like any gurgle from the trem. And because he doesn't like that sound, when he was working on his Ibanez signature model, of which there's now far too many, as with the Steve Vai ones, they worked very hard to take the gurgle out of the trem system so that it was super stable.
Right, okay.
But it can be used in musical effect. Now, you see the trem system, most trem systems, or trem arms rather, in the trem system, point upwards at the end.
Yeah.
You can sort of almost use that like a target.
With bump on it. Which
it still works. But I mean, I'm sort of using the palm edge of my hand, really.
Hear it.
It's easier said than done, as you see. Something like that. I mean, with trem systems, they've all got their own flavour. The PRS system, I don't think, is generally speaking not meant for really mad stuff. Although on the Mark Tremonti PRS, they've got a recess, just like I have on the back of my trem, so you can yank it back further.
Yeah.
And really, that's probably one of the only mitigating factors, really, in terms of it having more travel. You can also get a PRS with a Floyd Rose.
Yeah, yeah.
You don't see many in this country, but they do exist.
Yeah, okay.
And then you'd have all of the performance of a Floyd Rose if a trem system was really, really important to you. The other thing I find with the PRSs is the trem arm sits quite close to the body. It's quite flat in comparison to sort of like I've got a Goto system here, which is sort of more like the position of a sort of vintage Strat, maybe where it's sort of more possibly poking up a little bit more.
Yeah.
So you do get used to the different systems, and you also get used to the limitations in the systems and the feel. Obviously, if you want a trem system where you can go absolutely crazy, you know, a Floyd Rose is tough to beat from the point of view of sort of tuning stability and also range, you know, especially one with a massive recess behind the back like an Ibanez Steve Vai Gem or something like that. But, folks, try it. Even if you've got an Encore Strat set up like a pig, give it a go. Remember, the golden rules: do not grab the bar too hard. Generally speaking, you do not need to grab it.
Yeah.
It's the grabbing that causes the horrible tuning inconsistencies, by and large.
Yeah, okay.
The other thing to remember is that you will get more bang for your buck. For most sort of trem applications, until you start going crazy, a little bit of movement of the bridge goes a very long way.
Yeah.
And actually will afford you a better sound and more subtlety.
Yeah,
and
I think I like that.
That's nice.
The sound of that first sort of warble, really.
Yeah.
Probably more in some ways than more usable. It's more usable.
Yeah, I mean, you can use that anywhere.
Situations.
Yeah. I've also used it sometimes where you've got the real small spaces as you get up to the top of the fretboard.
Yeah.
And also you start maybe running out a little bit of real estate there, especially on the top string. And you want a vibrato. So I've worked at getting a really... I've worked at getting a sort of as natural a vibrato as I could. It's still mechanical because it's coming from a trem system. But there's ways of making it sound more mechanical and clunky by grabbing the bar and being a bit out of tune and being a bit cack-handed, or making it sound more natural. And in those tight little spots up there, especially if you've got the, maybe a melody that gets really high up. We've got 24 frets here.
Yeah.
You know, it can sometimes be sort of quite good to use the bar for that, maybe under certain circumstances.
Cool.
You know?
Sounds good. But
try all these things, you know. A little word about most Strat trem systems if you're struggling with tuning stability or the lack thereof.
Yeah.
When it comes to it, try tuning your trem system up. This is presuming your guitar's reasonably well set up with a fairly newish set of strings that aren't badly intonating and everything.
Yeah.
So set your trem system up for the best possible sort of return to the 0 point by tuning it up to pitch, not once, but over and over again. Then use the trem system, then retune. Use the trem system, retune, and keep going over it. Now, you can even see many, many professional guitarists, if you know what to look for, who are using a Strat trem system that is not going out of tune, but they'll nudge the trem bar now and again. Because most trem systems, sometimes even fairly modern trem systems, in some cases even like Floyd Rose systems, have a little bit of out of tuneness sometimes, in as much as you knock the bar and it all comes back in tune again. Otherwise, what you get, and what I've seen a lot of people have, is a vicious circle, whereby they tune the guitar up, and they can bend strings and it's all good. They use the trem system and it all goes terribly sharp. So they tune it back down again to compensate. Then they bend a string and it goes flat. And so they tune it back up again. They use the trem system, it goes sharp. And it's a vicious circle. So you want to set the trem system up so that when you use that trem system, after you've tuned it enough times, it should settle.
Yeah, okay.
Obviously a properly cut nut, lubricated if necessary, strings properly put on, all helps. Locking machine heads, all help. All of this stuff helps.
Yeah.
But if you're stuck with a vintage Strat, it's surprising how good the tuning stability can be.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you keep doing it until the system settles when you use the trem. Then when you're playing, if a string goes slightly flat, you just tap the bar gently and it'll all come back in again.
Cool.
Ask any decent guitar tech, they'll tell you.
On here, if I put it out a little bit, it's a bit further out.
It does. I tried that on mine. The only thing is that it will soon, as you work it and use it, it will soon go bury itself back in little like a mole.
But it does. But you can use it to gain for a little bit of time.
Yeah, I mean, you could tighten up the Allen key things on your Goto system and on the PRS system. You can tighten the Allen key up at the back of the arm, thus tensioning it that it kind of sits or it swings. It's up to you. Yeah. So you could do that so it's more likely to sit in one position.
Okay, yeah.
But generally speaking, I think the way it slots down, through playing, it sort of seems to dump down that way anyway eventually.
Cool. Thanks very much.
All right, mate. No worries. Cheers.